The reason why I am so passionate about dyslexia is because of being a dyslexic person myself. I feel like I really understand that we have a responsibility to change the narrative.
One of Epstein's accusers, Virginia Roberts, has made allegations against you.
King Charles was left completely speechless when he found out Princess Beatrice went public with royal secrets. She claims Queen Camilla and Prince Andrew have a secret pact that has been going on for years. Since this revelation, Buckingham Palace has erupted into chaos. Emergency meetings, broken alliances, and a constitutional crisis nobody expected. But what exactly did Princess Beatrice discover? Could this scandal actually bring down the crown itself? Join us as we find out what Princess Beatrice just revealed about Camilla and Andrew. Princess Beatrice's secret interview that shook King Charles in the palace. The British monarchy has faced its share of storms, from divorces to public scandals, but few moments compare to the shock of Princess Beatrice's unauthorized broadcast. Without palace approval, she spoke directly to the public, revealing details insiders say left King Charles stunned. Sources report that for a monarch still settling into his reign, the revelations cut deeper than almost anything in recent royal history. Beatrice spoke with a clarity that left little room for doubt. She referenced letters and notes she had personally seen, including correspondence between senior palace aides and Prince Andrew, documents that had never been made public. People who watched the interview described her tone as steady and unwavering, the kind of calm that comes from knowing exactly what you want to say. Usually, communications at Buckingham Palace run smoothly, but this time, everything broke down immediately. Staff were overwhelmed by a wave of phone calls and emails from journalists around the world. News networks replayed her statements repeatedly, and social media lit up almost instantly, with hashtag Beatrice Bombshell trending across platforms. The palace had never faced this kind of inside disclosure on such a scale. It was a crisis unlike any the palace had faced in decades, a scandal originating not from external reporting, but from inside the family itself. King Charles's response was immediate and telling. Sources say he canceled 2 scheduled public audiences and spent the afternoon in private meetings with his senior advisors at Clarence House. King Charles withdrew from his official duties for hours. He was caught between shielding his family and safeguarding the monarchy's reputation. Beatrice's revelations were not idle gossip, and the said documents and communications challenged how the palace had operated behind closed doors. The public response was immediate. Within hours, a YouGov poll showed a 12% drop in confidence in the monarchy's transparency. Constitutional and royal history experts rushed to make sense of the unfolding situation. For the first time in decades, a working royal had openly questioned the institution from within, raising uncomfortable questions about trust, accountability, and whether the crown could adapt to modern scrutiny. Many historians compared it to Princess Diana's 1995 Panorama interview, not for the sensational headlines, but for the way it shook the inner workings of the monarchy itself. At Windsor Castle, senior advisors called emergency meetings. Tension filled the palace. Some thought that Beatrice should be punished, saying it was needed to keep control. Others warned it would make things worse. Everyone knew one thing. This was more than a family fight. The monarchy itself was being tested from the inside. Beatrice had anticipated this. Acting as both insider and whistleblower, she had exposed weaknesses that the palace's usual crisis management playbook could not contain. The standard tools, tight-lipped press releases, carefully staged public appearances, and discreet internal inquiries were no longer enough. Her disclosures weren't simply aimed at individuals. They cut to the heart of the monarchy's operating structure. By forcing financial records, patronage arrangements, and decision-making processes into the open, she challenged an institution that had long relied on opacity as its shield. The revelations raised questions about accountability. public trust, and the compatibility of hereditary power with 21st century democratic expectations. By the end of that first day, King Charles's silence had become symbolic. A monarchy that had endured wars, abdications, and divorces now faced a new kind of threat. A trusted family member willing to trade comfort and loyalty for transparency. And yet, what Beatrice revealed that night was only the beginning. The scandal's darkest twist touches Princess Diana herself, her memory allegedly exploited in ways that forced Prince William to act. What does Princess Beatrice know that the world doesn't? Queen Camilla's letter reignited old wounds. The most damaging discovery Princess Beatrice made came from her father's private files, a sealed letter carrying Queen Camilla's insignia. Dated more than a decade ago, its wording stunned royal historians who later examined it. This wasn't the language of family correspondence. It read like a negotiation. One line in particular drew attention. "If your possessions remain intact, I will guarantee that your dignity does not become collateral." Analysts noted the cold, transactional tone. Experts in constitutional law said it hinted at calculated bargaining, not spontaneous family support. What stood out most was Camilla's reference to possessions. To legal advisors working with Beatrice, the term seemed deliberately vague, yet heavy with meaning. Historians pointed to the letter's allusion to past threats to the crown's continuity, interpreting it as a coded nod to one of the monarchy's most sensitive chapters. The suggestion was chilling. Materials linked to Diana, Princess of Wales, conversations, documents, perhaps recordings, had been preserved and could be used as leverage. Nearly 3 decades after Diana's passing, she remains a symbol of compassion and authenticity for millions. Any attempt to use her legacy as political currency struck the public as a betrayal. This wasn't an isolated suspicion. Royal watchers recalled how carefully the palace managed Diana's memory in the years after her death. But the idea that traces of her private life might have been weaponized to shield reputations disturbed even seasoned commentators. As expected, the public reacted fast. Social media exploded, and the hashtag Justice for Diana was trending everywhere in the world. People found it so hard to relate to how the monarchy had treated the memory of someone so loved. For Camilla, the blow was sudden and serious. Years of carefully building her image, moving from a controversial figure to an accepted queen consort, were now in danger. Critics said that if she had approved the arrangement, her reputation, earned over decades, was suddenly on shaky ground. The letter also opened new questions about palace decisions, loyalties, and how far private arrangements have shaped the public image of the royal family. If Prince Andrew held Diana-related material powerful enough to secure protection, what else might be hidden within palace archives? Biographers suggested the possibility of further documents, each carrying the weight to reshape the monarchy's carefully managed image. By linking her revelations to Diana, Beatrice made it clear this was about more than a family dispute. She knew that invoking the people's princess would stir emotions across generations. Strategically, the timing was devastating. Just as Camilla was finding broad acceptance, her name was suddenly tied to one of the darkest suspicions in royal history. And yet, Beatrice was not finished. The Diana letter was powerful enough to capture headlines on its own, but she had held back an even more consequential disclosure, one that suggested the agreement between Camilla and Andrew went far deeper than anyone imagined. What comes next exposes when and how their secret deal was struck, so calculated it shocked insiders. When did Camilla and Andrew seal their bargain? The Midnight Pact. While King Charles was hospitalized and unable to intervene, Queen Camilla and Prince Andrew forged what insiders now describe as one of the most calculated alliances in modern royal history. to negotiate while the monarch lay incapacitated, shocked even seasoned observers of palace politics. At first glance, the agreement seemed focused on saving Andrew. His public standing had collapsed under the weight of his ties to Jeffrey Epstein and the Virginia Giuffre lawsuit. His disgrace threatened to stain the monarchy itself. Yet, palace sources insist Camilla had far more at stake than family loyalty. Camilla, who had spent years reshaping her image from divisive figure to queen consort, saw in Andrew's crisis both a danger and an opportunity. Their bond, insiders noted, was pragmatic rather than affectionate. Both stood to gain, Andrew from survival, Camilla from protection. The terms of the deal were stark. Andrew would step back from public duties, give up his military titles and royal patronages, and retreat from the spotlight. In return, he would ensure that certain sensitive documents, files that extended well beyond his own scandals, remained sealed. Those files were said to contain information so damaging that they could have undone Camilla's decades of rehabilitation. Biographers believe they implicated other powerful figures and networks, raising disturbing questions about how much Andrew knew and how he had used that knowledge to shield himself. In exchange, Camilla promised to use her influence with Charles to guarantee Andrew a form of protection. While he would lose much of his public standing, he would not be cast out entirely. Legal costs would be covered, reputational damage managed, and palace communications would frame his retreat as dignified rather than disgraced. Behind the scenes, the plan included careful control of the media. Some reporters were briefed to present Andrew's withdrawal as voluntary and dignified. Carefully prepared statements aimed to keep questions and criticism to a minimum. Legal costs were covered by royal estates and palace funds, so Andrew could defend himself without using his own money. According to insiders, this wasn't a one-off deal. For years, informal negotiations had taken place at family gatherings, Sunday lunches, ceremonies, and private meetings, moments that appeared routine, but doubled as opportunities to shape strategy without leaving a paper trail. The pact held for a time. Andrew faded quietly from the public eye, and Camilla's standing within the monarchy strengthened. What looked like an organic family response to crisis was, in truth, a carefully designed plan. But the very documents that underpinned the agreement, letters, financial records, and communications, would later resurface in Princess Beatrice's hands, transforming whispers of conspiracy into hard evidence. When news of the deal finally emerged, it shifted public understanding of the monarchy. To many, it looked like decisions that appeared personal were actually political moves, meant to protect certain people rather than the monarchy itself. Lawyers and royal historians raised an alarm. If the top royals could make secret deals, what else had happened away from public eyes? For a monarchy that relies on trust, this showed how much was happening behind the scenes, hidden from everyone. And yet, even this conspiracy was only the prelude. Because when Prince William discovered the full extent of his stepmother's negotiations, his response was so fierce it threatened to rupture the royal family from within. When Prince William learned his mother's memory was exploited, his retaliation stunned Camilla and palace insiders. What did he do? Prince William's revenge. When Prince William learned that his mother's memory had been used as leverage, something inside him changed. Palace staff later said it wasn't an angry outburst, but a quiet, intense determination, a calm, controlled response that carried real weight. His actions would shake the household and shift the balance of power. After Princess Beatrice's revelations, William stayed deliberately silent. In public, he stayed calm, attending events and meeting officials just as usual. Behind closed doors, though, he was quietly putting together a plan that would have serious consequences. People close to William say he ran a careful investigation, working with advisors, lawyers, and palace staff around the clock to check documents, verify facts, and figure out the full picture. For those who knew him, this approach was typical. His military training had taught him to stay disciplined, study the problem, gather all the information, and plan each step before acting. He wasn't reacting on impulse or emotion. Everything was deliberate. Every file was examined, every move considered, and every decision weighed to avoid putting the monarchy at unnecessary risk. His calm public appearance had a purpose as well. By staying composed, he kept palace staff, the media, and even family members guessing about what he would do next. What his team uncovered, however, went far beyond what Beatrice had shared. Hidden among private correspondence was a letter from Queen Camilla herself, one that referenced Diana in a way William could not forgive. Biographers have long noted his fierce devotion to his mother's legacy, and this discovery pierced him at the deepest level. To William, Diana's name had been turned into a bargaining chip, and that was intolerable. His retaliation came swiftly. Within 48 hours of confirming the letter's authenticity, William's office issued a set of demands that rocked the establishment. Camilla, he insisted, must resign from all royal patronages connected to children's welfare, women's advocacy, and mental health. These were not random choices. Each of these causes had been central to Diana's humanitarian work, and William's message was crystal clear. His stepmother would not be allowed to occupy spaces tied to his mother's legacy while being accused of exploiting it. The blow was meant to hurt, and it did. Staff were ordered to clear Camilla's patronage offices while she attended a state function. By the time she returned, her name had already been stripped from organizations Diana had once championed. Constitutional historians struggled to find precedent for such a direct challenge from an heir apparent to a reigning consort. Behind closed doors, William and Camilla met face to face. Accounts of that meeting remain tightly guarded, but one senior courtier described it as a conversation that left no doubt who would define the monarchy's future. William's offensive wasn't limited to backroom orders. In public, he began wearing Diana's engagement ring more prominently and shaped his speeches around themes of truth, transparency, and accountability. At one charity event, he told the audience, "Truth does not threaten the crown. Silence does." Though he never named Camilla, no one doubted who the words were aimed at. What shocked even seasoned royal watchers was how far William was prepared to go. His legal advisors had already drafted documents challenging Camilla's position as queen consort, a move that would have triggered a constitutional showdown. King Charles suddenly faced a tough situation, caught between his son's determination and his wife's need to protect her place. William's choice to stand with Princess Beatrice made everything more tense. By supporting her, he transformed her from a single voice of concern into someone whose words carried serious influence. The fallout was enormous. Several of Camilla's closest advisors lost their positions, and her public influence collapsed almost overnight. For the first time in modern royal history, an heir to the throne had openly challenged a queen consort and won, but victory came at a cost. The household splintered into rival camps, forcing courtiers, relatives, and staff to declare loyalties in a way unseen for generations. William had achieved what he set out to do: protect his mother's memory and curtail Camilla's reach. But who had first whispered the truth to Beatrice? And how has this hidden arrangement taken root inside the palace? The whistleblower who shook the palace. The scandal that would rattle the British monarchy didn't start with a headline or a leaked photo. It started with a late-night phone call. The person calling was a retired royal staff member who had worked in the household for decades and decided to speak up about information they had long kept private. For too long, they had watched the arrangement between Prince Andrew and Queen Camilla unfold, and they finally decided they could no longer remain silent. At that same time, Princess Beatrice was already struggling with her role inside the family. She had been appearing less at royal events, sparking rumors in the press. Few realized that her absence had little to do with scheduling and everything to do with growing unease. She felt trapped, pulled into her father's image rehabilitation without truly consenting to be part of it. The phone call came at the moment her doubts were reaching their peak. The caller wasn't just any palace veteran. They had served through multiple reigns, navigating crises from Diana's fallout to Charles's controversies. By choosing to speak out, they broke a long-standing tradition. For generations, palace staff had been expected to keep everything private. For someone at that level to speak up signaled that the conspiracy around Andrew and Camilla had crossed a line too dangerous to ignore. According to palace insiders, the call lasted over an hour. The staffer guided Beatrice with precise instructions on where to locate hidden files inside her father's private archives. They knew the system inside out because they had helped design it. Every filing cabinet, every coded reference, every communication buried for years. The insider walked her through it step by step. The timing made it even more powerful. This wasn't a rash act. The staffer had wrestled with their conscience for months before deciding to pick up the phone. By contacting Beatrice directly, rather than going to the press or Parliament, they ensured the information came from inside the family itself, a choice that gave their revelations undeniable weight. Beatrice didn't hesitate. She didn't dismiss the call or seek comfort from her father. Instead of reacting immediately, Beatrice began quietly following the lead, digging deeper into palace records than ever before. Staff noticed her pulling back from public duties, canceling engagements, and consulting a London law firm for guidance. Her actions were no longer unusual. They could not be ignored. The documents she uncovered matched the insider's directions with striking accuracy. Every folder, letter, and sealed note was exactly where she had been told it would be. The precision of the information made it clear this was not the work of a bitter ex-employee. It came from someone with direct knowledge of palace operations. One discovery was especially striking. This was not the first time insiders had tried to raise the alarm. Earlier attempts had been quietly pushed aside, which made Beatrice's findings all the more explosive. Security specialists later observed how the call had been set up to avoid detection, bypassing the usual monitoring systems and keeping the whistleblower's identity hidden. It was the work of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. For Beatrice, the impact was personal. The revelations confirmed suspicions she had long kept to herself, changing the way she saw both her role and the institution around her. They confirmed doubts she had long held and gave her the confidence to move from loyal daughter to active investigator, willing to challenge the system from within. Queen Camilla recognized the threat immediately. Within days, she was attending emergency meetings and making unannounced visits to Clarence House, aware that palace arrangements were unraveling. The choice to contact Beatrice rather than external authorities proved decisive. Coming from within the family, the revelations carried weight that could not be dismissed. Historians later described the call as unprecedented. A long-serving staffer breaking decades of silence challenged centuries of tradition. It was not just a breach of loyalty. It redefined what loyalty to the crown could mean. The effects went far beyond Andrew and Camilla. That single call set a new standard for accountability within the monarchy, showing even the most secretive institutions could no longer operate entirely in the shadows. Beatrice's decision reshaped her role in the family and sent ripples through the monarchy, raising lasting questions about transparency and trust. The ensuing events caused unimaginable change and reshaped the monarchy itself. How did the bravery of a single princess upend centuries of royal custom? Beatrice's stand for truth. In September 2025, Princess Beatrice spoke out, and it stunned the royal family. A senior royal facing this level of scrutiny was almost unheard of. She revealed secret dealings, including matters involving her father, Prince Andrew, and it sparked a flurry of action. Within weeks, Parliament launched committees to review royal finances, patronages, and decision-making. The palace was caught off guard. For years, many operations had been handled quietly, behind closed doors. Now the public was watching, asking questions, and the systems that once protected the family were starting to crack. Queen Camilla in particular felt the impact. Years of careful image management, from a controversial figure to a widely accepted queen consort, were under threat. Polls showed a sharp drop in public trust, and several charities connected to her patronage began stepping back. Some organizations even publicly thanked Beatrice for bringing the misuse of influence to light. At the same time, a major review of royal patronages was already underway after Queen Elizabeth II's death, with King Charles and Queen Camilla stepping back from several roles to focus on their core duties. Camilla's patronages, particularly those supporting children's welfare and women's advocacy, areas closely linked to Princess Diana's work, were quickly reassigned to other family members. Behind the scenes, Princess Anne offered quiet but steady support to Beatrice. Known for her practical and no-nonsense style, Anne's backing helped protect Beatrice from criticism while giving weight to calls for change within the royal family. Legal experts noted the broader impact of Beatrice's actions. By speaking out, she set a new standard for accountability within the royal family. Future monarchs could no longer rely solely on tradition and protocol to handle sensitive matters behind closed doors. The effects went beyond Britain. Royal families in other constitutional monarchies, from Northern Europe to Commonwealth nations, were watching closely. Beatrice's stand became a reference point for transparency, showing that even institutions with centuries of tradition could be questioned and reformed. Her decision marked a clear departure from the usual royal discretion. It signaled a shift toward greater openness and public accountability, changing how the monarchy functions in the modern era. Meanwhile, King Charles faced one of the most difficult tests of his reign. As support for his leadership waned, the calls for reform grew louder. Traditional palace crisis management tactics, press releases, staged appearances, carefully worded statements, were powerless against evidence that came directly from inside the family. The scandal had stripped away the illusion of control. What surprised many was how Beatrice herself evolved. Far from retreating after the storm broke, she embraced her new role. She began working with international human rights groups, speaking at conferences in Geneva, Johannesburg, and São Paulo about transparency and ethical leadership. For the first time, she was no longer just a supporting royal. She was shaping global conversations. Inside the palace, reforms moved quickly. Detailed financial reporting became mandatory. Expenditures once hidden under vague, sovereign support budgets now had to be documented and reviewed. Even minor royal activities required public reports, a level of openness that would have been unimaginable in her grandparents' time. These changes also transformed palace culture. Jobs that once relied on absolute discretion became less attractive to traditional candidates, while new staff were hired with legal and compliance expertise. The monarchy was being rebuilt to operate more like a modern public institution, where secrecy could no longer shield corruption. The ripple effects extended to the Commonwealth. Nations began re-evaluating their ties to the crown, with some questioning whether the monarchy had been operating with hidden agendas in their own governments. Global media followed every development, treating Britain's crisis as a case study in how even the most ancient institutions must evolve or face collapse. And yet, the outcome was not the monarchy's destruction. Paradoxically, Beatrice's defiance saved it. By forcing reform from within, she restored a measure of public trust that external critics could never have achieved. Support for the crown actually stabilized once new oversight mechanisms were in place, showing that accountability, rather than blind loyalty, would secure its future. In the end, Beatrice accomplished what centuries of reformers had failed to do. She pulled the monarchy into the modern era of accountability. The crown's legitimacy could no longer rest on tradition alone. It had to meet the same standards of integrity expected of every public institution. Her courage didn't just change her family. It redefined the relationship between crown and country, leaving behind a monarchy that was scarred, but undeniably stronger. So, which team are you? Team Camilla or Team Beatrice? What do you think Princess Diana would say about this? Let us know what you think. Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.